Good evening and welcome to CYC News for the 11th of February 2018 and the 4th of Amshir 1734 AM. I'm Andrew Nara, and in today's headlines, US-led coalition strikes kill Syrian pro-regime forces. Tehran blanketed with smog for third straight day. US to reduce troop levels in Iraq. Silvio Berlusconi says migrants are causing serious alarm in Italy. North Korea using its Berlin embassy to acquire nuclear tech. Records fall in Moscow as snow blankets capital. Cuts to CDC epidemic programs could endanger Americans. Russia, North Korea and the Cold War. The 2018 Winter Olympics are here. But first to Syria, where the US-led coalition fighting ISIS in Syria conducted artillery strikes against pro-regime forces last Wednesday, killing an estimated 100 pro-regime fighters, according to a coalition statement. The attack took place in Kusham in the middle Euphrates River Valley, 5 miles east of the agreed-on deconfliction line, designed to separate Russian-backed regime troops and US-backed forces in Syria. The coalition described its action, which, if confirmed, could represent the largest number of pro-regime casualties inflicted by the US-led coalition, as carried out in self-defense. Syrian state news agency Sana described the action as an aggression by the coalition against popular forces who are fighting ISIS and the US-backed Syrian Democratic Forces. According to a coalition statement, its strikes were carried out after forces allied with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad initiated an unprovoked attack against a well-established Syrian Democratic Forces headquarters, where coalition advisors were working with US-backed Syrian fighters. The US strikes were carried out by manned and unmanned aircraft as well as a US high-mobility artillery rocket system. According to US Air Force's Central Command, US F-22 stealth jets, F-15 fighters and MQ-9 drones were involved in the counterattack. Lieutenant Colonel Damien Picard said along with the ground-based fire support, these aircraft released multiple precision-fire munitions and conducted strafing runs against the aggressor force, stopping their advance and destroying multiple artillery pieces and tanks. No coalition or US personnel had been killed or wounded in the engagement, but one member of the Syrian Democratic Forces was wounded. To Iran now, where schools in the capital Tehran were closed for a third straight day last Wednesday, as severe air pollution continued to blanket the city. A thick haze with dangerous pollution levels had covered Tehran since Monday, obscuring the city's skyline and prominent landmarks. Authorities also implemented traffic restrictions in an effort to improve air quality. President Hassan Rouhani addressed the issue at a press conference in Tehran, saying Iranians cannot be indifferent to the problem. The Iranian government attaches great importance to the question of environment. All of us are responsible to the issues related to environment. On Monday, Deputy Health Minister Ali Reza Raisi announced that 20,000 Iranians die every year from ailments related to air pollution. Tehran is especially susceptible to trapped smog, as the metropolitan area, home to over 8 million people, is surrounded by mountains. According to state media, just last month, elementary schools in Tehran were forced to close due to dangerous pollution. Environmental concerns across the country have become significant issues for the nation's top leaders. Earlier this year, Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei authorized the allotment of $150 million to tackle pollution in the heavily industrial province of Khuzestan. The number of US forces in Iraq will fall after the government in Baghdad declared victory over ISIS, an Iraqi government spokesman told CNN. Last Monday, the US-led coalition fighting ISIS announced a shift in focus in its military campaign in Iraq, which according to the Iraqi government spokesman Saad al-Hadithi means US troops would gradually reduced. Last December, Iraq's military declared that it had fully liberated all of Iraq of ISIS terrorist gangs and retaken full control of the Iraqi-Syrian border. The Pentagon said in December there were around 5,200 American forces in Iraq, where their ongoing presence is politically sensitive for Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi, who is facing national elections in March. The coalition statement did not say where the forces would go, but the Trump administration announced last year troop levels in Afghanistan would rise. ISIS rapidly captured a large swath of territories in Iraq and Syria and declared an Islamic caliphate in 2014. At one point, it had held more than 34,000 square miles territory from the Mediterranean coast to the south of Baghdad. The campaign to eliminate ISIS' territorial foothold took nearly 25,000 coalition airstrikes in more than 3 years. In 2003, an American-led invasion toppled Iraqi President Saddam Hussein, and troops engaged in extended fighting across the country, battling an insurgency and later sectarian violence. At their peak, US troop levels in Iraq stood near 166,000. The US combat mission in Iraq ended in 2010, but some American troops remained in the country to train and assist Iraqi forces. To Italy now, where the country's former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi has warned the number of migrants in the country has caused serious social alarm. Speaking last Monday, in the aftermath of the shooting in which 6 African migrants were injured, Berlusconi said that the current climate surrounding immigration in Italy amounted to an emergency. He told Italian television channel Rai 3, according in Italy, there's a perception of insecurity that we must take into account. There is a very serious social alarm that derives from the presence in Italy of many illegal migrants. We Italians are not racist. However, there are emergency situations. 4 Nigerians, 1 Malian and 1 Gambian were injured in the attack in Macerata, which raised fresh tensions over immigration in Italy. Berlusconi, who labelled the counter-left Italian government's asylum policy a social time bomb, has since clarified his comments, insisting Italians are not racists. He said, "Criminality is not distinguished by the colour of skin. We Italians are not racist, but we cannot ignore the social alarm that comes from the presence of many illegal immigrants. To address the issue of immigration, we need European treaties and the help of law enforcement in the streets." North Korea has been acquiring technology for its nuclear weapons program through its Berlin embassy, according to Germany's intelligence chief. In a press release from Germany's public broadcaster ahead of a documentary about North Korea's missile program, Hans-Georg Maaßen, head of Germany's security agency, said, "We determined that from the North Korean embassy in Berlin, weapons procurement took place. In our view, with an eye toward the missile program and in part also the nuclear program. If we find such things, we stop it, but we cannot guarantee that this can be prevented in all cases." Maaßen said authorities believe parts of North Korea's weapons program were acquired through shadow buyers or shadow markets abroad, which they then brought in Germany. Many of the purchases were so-called dual-use goods that could be used for both civilian and military purposes, according to the documentary. German authorities received evidence of product purchases destined for North Korea's missile program in 2016 and 2017. The report alleges North Korean diplomat tried in 2014 to acquire a monitor that measures gas emissions during the production of chemical weapons. A spokesman from the North Korean embassy in Berlin said the report was simply not true. He said, "We rejected and distanced ourselves from local media reports over the weekend that used our embassy to obtain technology secretly for any nuclear weapons programs." The German Foreign Ministry said in a statement that it was not currently aware of any illegal activities in the North Korean embassy in Berlin. At least 1 person has died and 5 injured as Moscow endures its heaviest snowfall in more than 60 years. According to local media RBC, more than 850 flights were either cancelled or postponed last weekend. The snowfall broke a Moscow record set in 1957. Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin said in a tweet, "1 person died from a falling tree that hit an electric power line. According to the latest data, there are 5 victims. Be careful." Sobyanin also said children were not required to attend school because of the severe weather. Moscow Deputy Mayor Petri Biryakov said the Russian capital recorded 22 centimeters of snow last Sunday, more than half of its monthly average snowfall, with that figure rising to 47 centimeters by the end of Monday, Deputy Mayor Moscow Petr Biryakov said. In one Moscow district, the military was deployed to clean up the snow, which had become too much for local services to handle. To health news, and the former chief of US Centers Disease Control and Prevention says that the decision to cut 80% of its epidemic prevention activities overseas could pose a grave danger to the United States because it would significantly increase the chance of an epidemic that will spread without our knowledge and endanger lives in country and around the world. The CDC informed Personnel in the last 3 weeks it was discontinuing its work in 39 out of 49 countries, where its Center for Global Health helps prevent, detect, and respond to dangerous infections, disease threats such as Ebola and the Zika virus. The agency said it was forced to make the decision because it doesn't expect any new funding for the programs. The decision sparked an outrage, with many health officials and organizations saying the Congress and the Trump administration are leaving the nation vulnerable to an outbreak that could affect millions of Americans. Dr. Tom Frieden, director of the CDC from 2009 to 2017, said we can either help other countries stop disease outbreaks abroad or fight them here at home. If funding for global health security isn't found, CDC will have to retreat from the front lines of fighting not terrorism, but terrible organisms in 30 countries. The goal of the CDC's Center for Global Health is to stop outbreaks at their source, long before they reach the United States. According to its website, the organization monitors 30 to 40 outbreaks in other countries every day, and has trained more than 10,000 disease detectives in more than 70 countries. Personnel were notified of the cuts in a 40-minute conference call in January 18. Work would remain in 10 priority countries, including India, Thailand, Kenya, Uganda, and Liberia. In the 39 other countries where programs operate, transition planning to end them is underway, with full departure by October 2020. If more funding becomes available, operations may be enhanced in 5 countries, including China, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Ethiopia. And in sport, it will be cold and colorful, dramatic and dangerous, exciting and emotional. The 2018 Winter Olympics is set to burst life into South Korea. Some events have already begun, but an opening ceremony full of pride, passion, tradition, and most probably a bit of politics got in the Pyeongchang Games officially underway in Friday. Nearly 3,000 athletes from 93 countries are set to compete for a record of 102 medals across 15 different sports from February 9 to 25. From the participation of Russian athletes in the wake of doping scandals, and icy Siberian winds potentially rendering its coldest games ever, to North Korea's inclusion, there are many things to look forward to about Pyeongchang 2018. When South Korea was awarded the Games in 2011, few would have predicted 7 years later that close neighbor and bitter rival North Korea would be loggerheads with a US president who happened to be a former star of a reality TV show. And while US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, who have publicly traded barbs, won't be at the opening ceremony, US Vice President Mike Pence and Kim's sister Kim Yo-jong will. North Korea is sending 22 athletes to the Winter Olympics to compete in ice hockey, ice skating and skiing, as well as a cheering squad. The nation wasn't present at Sochi in 2014, but has been a regular at the Summer Games. They will march together with the South Korean athletes at the opening ceremony under the Korean unification flag. And that's all for CYC News. A reminder that you can watch this news bulletin again throughout the week on YouTube. I'm Andrew Nada, and at the CYC studios in Sydney, Australia. Have a good night.